Welcome to Entrepreneur S.O.S, where we help business owners navigate the often complex world of entrepreneurship. Each week, we share expert advice or real-life experiences from successful entrepreneurs who have faced and overcome the challenges of building a business. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, this is the podcast designed to help you. So join us each week. Let's grow your business together. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps us to reach more entrepreneurs like you. And today we have the pleasure of talking with JoJo Bennington. I met JoJo in a network marketing company that we're both connected to and was extremely inspired by her and her story. JoJo went from being a bartender and blackjack dealer to a millionaire, and all with the shift in mindset. She's the managing director of the Las Vegas chapter of eWomen's Network, has won numerous awards, is the founder of Up Women Retreats, and has written a book. And we'll link all her information and her website in the show notes if you'd like to connect with JoJo. JoJo, first of all, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm super excited.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I had heard your story, but it's been many years. And I know at the time you were stuck at a certain point in your business and shifted that. But why don't you share your story from the bartender and the blackjack dealer moving forward and how everything changed for you?
Okay. Thank you for having me here today and for inviting me to share my story. When you grow up in Vegas, you say, I'm not going to be a blackjack dealer and I'm not going to be a bartender. And then that's what happened. And it was great. It was a great living. It just wasn't something that sparked my mind. I wanted to have something of my own, create something of my own, and counting to 21 every day. Didn't do that. And so really stepping out into entrepreneurship and opening 3 brick and mortar businesses, have 3 tanning salons with a little boutique and massage therapist and smoothie bar, like all of these little things. And although it was great thinking of stepping into small business, I was like, oh, I'm not going to be a blackjack dealer anymore. I'm not going to pour drinks anymore. And I'm going to have my own thing. And I just spent several $100,000 to buy myself a job that I could never leave. I
can totally relate to that. I know exactly how you feel. Small business, people think it's not, but you are chained.
Always. And so when we talk about passive income, that was not it. I was being there 24/7, 365. And loved it, built it from the ground up. I was very interested in nutrition and I really wanted to go that way. So I was going to go back to school, get my degree. Like I had all this plan and it didn't excite me. It was just a path. And accidentally one day somebody showed up in my space and said, hey, have you ever tried this? And I said, no. And I said, no, I'm not interested. But I got a chance to really look back on that and make a different decision. And that yes just led to another yes, which led to another yes. Yeses always take us in whatever direction it's going to be. So they always open a door, right? Just like no actually opens a door because it keeps you where you are. It takes you on a different path. But the yeses that I made at that time, and it was over 17 years ago now, changed everything. And I said, hey, I'm going to be a millionaire. I had no clue what that meant. Not a clue. And I just knew that I could do it. And I sold my tanning salons and stepped in with both feet, thinking I'm just going to go on this path and it's going to be right. My husband thought I was crazy. Told me when I told him I was going to sell the tanning salons, he was like, I don't get it. That makes no sense to me, what you're doing right now. But I just knew was a direction for me that I needed to take. And so starting my business, stepping in, things went really well, had a great team growing, and network marketing was not a space that I ever thought that I would be in. People go, oh, I don't want to be in sales. I have to say, we're all in sales 24/7. We're all selling all the time. We sell our kids on broccoli. We sell our husbands on a movie. We're selling all the time, even though we don't realize we are. And it was going really well. And then, something happens and you start to doubt yourself. And then something happens. And then something else happens, right? So when you get on the path of that negative thought process, that's where I got stuck. I started to look at the things that were going wrong instead of the things that were going right and focusing there. And I got really stuck in the muck of the bad things that were happening instead of the really good things that were happening, because there was a ton of good things, but I couldn't get past the focus. One of my mentors said, okay, here's your job for the next month. Go lock yourself in a room and listen to nothing but positive things. Listen to nothing but things that lift you up. Listen to nothing but things that move your vision forward. And while I went and locked myself away, and I did that because I'm an obedient student, right? I locked myself away. I listened to his podcast. I listened to David Wood. I listened to Tony Robbins. I listened to Abraham Hicks. So all of these things that I put in my space to lift my vibration up, and things just started to happen in a positive way. And actually things were happening and I wasn't even there to create them to happen. I was sitting in the background and they were being created around me.
Me goosebumps.
I know.
Right? So who knew? Anyway, long story short, here we go. And we hit Millionaire and lots of little bumps and things in between, but moving us forward. There's the thing was always that you can never grow your business larger than what you grow yourself. And you can never grow your circle larger than what you can grow yourself. So that's such an important key piece.
So when you say you locked yourself in a room or locked yourself in for 30 days, did you like 24/7? What did that look like actually?
I got up in the morning, I made a cup of tea, I went in my office, I closed the door. And I didn't take phone calls from my team. I just unplugged and said, you guys are on your own for a little while. You know, you need something, go here. My mentor said he would step in and help out. And so I directed everyone in different directions instead of relying on me. And I just focused. There was no news. There was no anything. There was no outside. Even my husband, like he would talk. And this is where I came up with my little thought process of the antivirus program that runs in the back of my head and still does all the time. Was that when there was something in front of me that I couldn't get away from. So your husband, I can't get away from him. He's watching the news. He's talking about negative stuff. Even when I go, don't talk about that stuff to me, they'll get it. And
No.
so I had to then start running this program in the back of my mind of, I'm going to have a team of 30,000. I'm so happy and grateful that I have these things. I called it my little Norton antivirus program that ran in the back of my head, because every time something negative come in, that would come along and just wipe it out. So it was always running there. I had like 5 or 6 different mantras that ran through the back of my brain all the time. And they're still there. They just change now into different things, but that's what kept me going straight.
I have a question around that, because I think as our listeners are listening, a lot of us use those affirmations. How long do you think it took for you to actually start believing those? Because there's always a part of us when we have that self-doubt that I feel are like, oh, whatever, you're so full of it. And then you just keep doing it and do it repetitively. Was there a point where you felt like a tipping point? You started to realize, wow, I'm actually believing this now, whereas I maybe didn't believe it before.
That's a great question. Always a ping pong match. I'm amazing. I suck. I'm amazing. I suck. So it's always that. Always.
I love that ping pong match. Exactly.
So the tipping point for me was reading Big Magic. So she says, I had to learn how to put every emotion there. So every emotion, we got on the bus, no matter where we went, all the emotions were there. Love, hate, fear, all the voices were always there. And so it just became a point of knowing that the fear was always going to be there. The self-doubt was always going to be there. And so no matter what, that, because it's a part of you, you can't just go, okay, it's not a part of me anymore, because it's still a piece. So it's just a matter of going, you get to come along for the ride. You just don't get to drive the bus anymore. And so I can look in the back and I can see that they're there, and they might try to backseat drive now and then, but they're in the back. They don't get to drive anymore. So it's always that thought process of who's driving my bus. And I can shift that really quickly now. It didn't happen that way in the beginning. It took a minute.
I love that, because it's a visualization that people can actually use in their head. I think that sometimes when you add a scene, like you said, like a bus and the driver, and you can connect that to those thoughts, maybe it's your mind can understand it in a more linear way so that you're like, oh, that's not driving the bus. This is driving the bus. You're a passenger. I think that's going to be a key part that I think a lot of our listeners are going to go, oh, because for me, even just thinking that, oh, that's a great way to really connect those negative thoughts. Who's driving that bus? Who's a passenger? And that they are going to come with, and that it's okay to have that. Because I believe that a lot of people don't understand that even though you're successful, that you don't have self-doubt, that you don't have negative thoughts. People don't understand that doesn't go away. When you get to a next level, it's going to be there. So I love that you can correlate that and give us that visualization. That's really great.
Guess what? It gets even more. So the bigger you step up, the bigger your uncomfortable zone gets. So when you look at, okay, so I'm just going to make a phone call, right? So that could be a huge thing for somebody. Right now, for me, that phone call, it used to be a big thing. Right now, that phone call is really simple. But stepping on a stage with a microphone in your hand to have a conversation with an audience of several thousand people, that's a whole different conversation. Right? That's a whole different piece of fear. So it's always stepping through that. And once you get comfortable in that space, then it's bigger, and then it's bigger. And so it's always moving into the next space of testing ourselves. And I'm always living in the unknown zone of I just say yes. And I'm always amazed at what shows up and the people that show up and the doors that get open. But if I don't take that few seconds of just crazy courage to step forward, none of that ever happens. And you breathe and jump, right?
So I love the analogy with the back of the bus, because Monique said, regardless where we're at, the self-doubt always creeps back in. And I was listening to some Joe Dispenza this morning and staying in that positive state. But again, we're only human. Do you have a daily practice, or do you have something, if something comes up on a daily basis or a weekly basis, do you have any tools that you personally use that are effective for you?
Yes. So I journal a ton. I have a journal problem, just so you know. So those
Are you a connoisseur?
Are all journals.
You're a connoisseur of journals. That's great.
And I have, if you could see, I have a basket on the floor of ones I'm working in right now. And I have one we're currently working on today. Right? So I have journals everywhere. And so here's the hint. I've started writing on the outside of them what's in them, so I don't have to search. So here's a good marker right on the outside, because then you go, oh, now I have to find this one sentence that I wrote, and you have no clue where it's at. So always write on the outside what's in them. So journaling is definitely a piece of it. I'm always visioning, and I started this a long time ago. I started writing things just, so I'm a doodler. Right. So I'm a fidgeter. I have a little fidget spinner. I constantly always have to be stimulated in some way. So when I doodle my next number, like right now, I'm working on 100. So 100 is a great number for me. 100 is a point in my business I want to be at. 100 is a point in my eWomen network that I want to be at. There's this 100 number that I'm working around. So I write that number everywhere, and it's always in my vision. It's always in my focus. And so it's just something that keeps me going, okay, now I remember why I do this. So like when I'm having a bad moment and I look down and I see my 100, I go, oh, that's right. Okay, who's driving my bus right now? So it's always back to that of who's driving my bus. So maybe Cranky. What was the little movie with the feelings and the emotions? The Pixar movie. Oh my gosh, did you not see that with all the emotions, and they show what's going on in her head? All of the joy and the fear and the sadness and all of these emotions come together, and they show you what happens inside of her head. That's how I'm always looking at it, right? All of my emotions are always there. It's just who's driving the bus, and they all have a place. And it's so good for us to remember that it's okay to feel our feelings, because a lot of times I think we get in personal growth and then we say, oh, I can't feel that negative thing, or I can't have a sad moment, or I can't have a judgment moment. And then we judge ourselves, right? Yeah. And so it's always remember, it's a good piece to give ourselves grace for feeling our feelings, working through them, and then getting back to that place of, okay, now I can be here. Okay, so I had to let my fear drive the bus for a second. I had to let my anger drive the bus for a second. And so just to move through all of that, always to remember that it's just moving me from one spot to the next, and then I can put them in the back again, and then my courage gets started.
I love that. I'm a big Abraham Hicks fan. Sandy
Oh,
knows this.
me
I
too.
listen to them daily. It's how I start my day every
Yeah.
single day, because she relates so much to emotion as just a direction on where you're going. So if you're feeling anger or contrast or fear, you realize that's not maybe the direction you need to go, or you need to examine it. Going back to you being in that room, because I really am like, oh, what's she doing there?
I know.
You're listening to all this positive stuff. You're raising your frequency, which I think people don't really understand. When people hear vibration, I'm not sure it's a term that is always understood. Could you maybe explain it in your terms, how you felt yourself raising up to meet where you were supposed to be? Because I feel like that's what happened in that room for you. You were in a place where you were vibrationally not able to connect with whatever the outcome was.
Right.
And so you spent this time to pour into yourself. And at some point you learned that pivotal moment with Elizabeth, which I think is amazing. But maybe explain to people the process that looked like, because I think people don't understand it's an actual process. Like, it doesn't just happen. All of a sudden you're just, I'm great.
There are days I don't believe that too. Just so you know, it's still there. So lots of listening and journaling, lots of exploring some of the less than positive relationships in my space and how I was choosing to see them. And it was a point in time for me where it allowed me to see those people as their potential versus their negative space, because we all have that potential. And so to value them as their potential versus how they were showing up at that moment. But to work through all of that, because we have all this negative stuff. We have all this negative stuff towards myself. How could I let that happen? How did I let that happen for myself? So it was a matter of forgiveness. So forgiving myself, forgiving the people around me, forgiving the situations, forgiving the things that I allowed to happen, forgiving the things that I did. So all of these things, that was a huge piece of it, was coming to terms with all of that and going, okay, I'm human and I have to forgive myself. And then holding on to the vision. So coming up with the vision of where I saw myself being and what I saw my impact being in the world, and holding that, writing that every single day. I would get up in the morning and I would rewrite it. So it wasn't just a matter of reading it, but I would rewrite it. So in my own handwriting, not typing, but pen to paper. I transcribed. So the 4 agreements, if you haven't read it, read it, because it's amazing. And so the 4 agreements I transcribed. I also transcribed the master key system, parts of it, not all of it. It's long, but just to put myself in that mind frame of remembering that everything that I was creating was floating in this vortex around me. I just needed to put all these puzzle pieces and put them together. So lots of transcribe. When I talk about journals, that's why. So journal after journal of lifting myself up and being there.
So when you say transcribed, you actually listen to it and then you wrote it. So you stop.
So if you've ever transcribed, it's listening to a couple of words, putting pen to paper, writing it down, right? Then going
and listening
back,
to it 16 times and going back. Yeah, I've done. Yeah.
So that was the question I was going to ask. Is, were you reading this book and then transcribing it over, or were you audibly listening to these things and then stopping and transcribing what you heard and how it related to your life? Or were you transcribing it word for word? Maybe explain that process, because that's really fascinating. That I
word
think that,
for word, sound in my head. So earbuds in. And here's a trick that I've learned, especially for my brain that can run 80 at times, and which there you go, the fidget thing, right? That's always something that I've learned, that if I listen to something on the outside of my head, right, I turn speaker on the outside, that I go on too many thought trips. But if I stick my earbuds in my ears, or I stick my headphones on, then it's in my head. It's a different experience for me. So I can listen closely. I go on less thought trips. My brain's less all over the place. And I would listen to a sentence, write it down, read it back. So listen to a sentence. Sometimes it's by word, because you listen to the sentence and then by the time you go to write it down, you forget what they said. So you have to listen to it again. So a lot of times it is 10, 15, 20 times. It's a process. And there's nothing that ingrains something more in you than that process. For sure. Even now, still, when I get a book, I get the Audible and I get the book, and I read and listen at the same time. because that allows me to absorb it at a higher level.
I've done the transcription piece, but not a whole book.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that happens when you have that and you write it down that's visceral. Even learning, like I remember going back to school, there's something when you write it down, it sticks. And I love that. And I had totally forgotten about that. I'm glad you brought that up.
I think it's an amazing tip for people out there that are really struggling with their mindset is to pick a book, like you said, and listen to it on such a level that you have to listen over and over and transcribe so that it becomes visceral and ingrained into who you are. It's brilliant. It's never something that I've heard someone say that they've done in this process. And I think it's a brilliant way to really consume that information and take it in on a cellular level.
So 2 things. So there's the feeling is the secret. So if somebody really wanted to do one, that would be great to start with. That would be great. There's also scroll number 2 in The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino, right? So to go back and actually write that one over and over. And so would be 2 simple ways to step into that. When you talked about vibration, so everybody feels it all the time. It's the fact that you may not acknowledge that's what it is. But when you walk into a room and you're attracted to this person and that person repels, right? There's different vibration. So now you walk into a room and you have a person over here that's vibing high and you have a person over here that's vibing low. Let's say you walk into the middle. You have a choice. You have a choice. I can go vibe high over here, or I can go vibe low over there. It's always your choice where you're going to go. And people will be attracted to you based on that. So if you choose to go over to the low vibe and we're talking about negative stuff and we're judging people and gossiping, let's think we're at a party, right? So what's happening over in that corner? And oh my gosh, I can't believe she wore that. And how could they serve that kind of food? And so all of that. And oh my God, did you see what happened on the news today? That's all the conversation having over here. And then this person's, I took the best yoga class today. It was absolutely amazing. I learned this lifted me up. I met this incredible person. We're talking about grounding and walking in the park and we're all of these things, right? So 2 different conversations. It's a completely different side of the room, even though we're in the same room. And your vibe, you're going to automatically be attracted wherever you choose, but remember the people are going to be attracted to you as well. So I'm here. Now, if somebody walks in the room and they have to make that choice as well. Have you ever had somebody walk up into the middle of your conversation and they're like, oh, this ain't for me, right? And they walk out because they don't feel right in that space because their vibe is too low. So they could make a choice at that point to step in and go, okay, I'm going to vibe high with these guys and figure out what's going on here because this feels great. Or I'm going to choose to go down here, go hang out in the corner and do all this negative, icky stuff over here. Totally a choice always. So it's your choice where you choose to lift yourself up to in every situation. And I'm always choosing to be higher and hopefully lift up the people that are over there and go, come be a part of this, invite them in, but then make sure that you keep your vibe high, right? So you can't then drop down to feel good with them. You'll find that's what happens with your friends as well. Some will start to fall away. You vibe higher. They don't feel good in your space anymore. They're like, you've changed. I'm like, yes, I have. So it's not me that's changed. Really, it's you that's changed because now you're pointing out the fact that you don't want to come along. And that's okay too. It's okay. It's okay to release people. It's okay to release situations. If they are not serving you and you have to drop yourself to a level that doesn't feel good to be there, then you're compromising that vibe for yourself on a daily basis. And then you go home and it's so much work to bring yourself back up to that versus just staying there. Makes sense?
It makes total sense. And it's something that I've just recently gone through, releasing several people out of my life because of that. For me, it was getting to that point to give myself permission to do that. And I knew that's what it was because I'm totally on the same wavelength as you as far as this is concerned, the belief, but giving myself permission to release. And after I did, it was a huge relief. It was like 100 pounds off my shoulder.
I think that's the biggest obstacle that people face is giving themselves the permission to say, you no longer serve, because we've been trained to, oh, she's a good person, but, or she's great, so I'll stick around. I know she does this, but she means well. Or we lack the confidence or self-worth in ourselves, I feel, to move forward without those people in our life, because it can be scary to let go. Sandy and I have had this conversation over the last 2 years. I've edited my circle and edited my circle and edited my circle, and I keep editing it because I used to surround myself with a lot of people who were narcissistic. I had a pattern and I didn't realize it. And as I became more self-aware and more self-value, I realized, wow, I'm allowing behaviors that just shouldn't be in my life. And it was hard to let go of some of those friendships, and you get sucked back in, and to give yourself that permission to know you're worthy of your dreams, one, and you're worthy of people who want to be on the same path and are going to treat you with the same respect and kindness and love that you want to go to, I think is the biggest obstacle for a lot of people in this situation. I know for me, it was so scary. When I did it 5 years ago, I was petrified because I had built my whole life around this group of people, and then I was just walking away.
Yeah, absolutely. That can feel scary. It becomes part of your identity, that group.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's fearful to walk away from that, because then who will be in my life? And
Who will love me? Who will love
Right.
me? They accepted me. Who will love me? I think that's such a big part of it.
And remembering that it's okay to go back there now and then to check in and keep your vibe high. It may not feel comfortable anymore. It may not feel like you want to be there. It may not even be welcoming. It's just a continual confirmation of I don't want to be there. Or you never know. Sometimes they choose to step up and vibe differently, think differently, talk differently, have different conversations, see the world in a different view. Things shift for everyone, just like they've shifted for us. So I very rarely do I close the door completely on anyone, right? And I'm always the benefit of the doubt giver, believing that I can see the shifts that I've made in my life, what holds me from thinking that someone else couldn't do the same thing. And so it's always dip your toe in and test the water and see where it's at without falling completely into the pool and getting sucked back in. It's such an interesting dance between the two. And it's such a small boundary line between the two. And to be able to still hold who you are and honor that while you honor someone else and leave them on the side, it's a very challenging thing. In multiple areas of my life have really attempted to adopt that. It's not always easy. Like we think, okay, I could do that, but there's difficult moments of trying to figure that out, of taking responsibility on something that someone else has done. So what was my role in that? How did I attract that into my space? The questions of taking responsibility for that and then shifting it, especially in network marketing. Like we go, oh, we have the most amazing company and we attract all these incredible people. Guess what? People are still people. People are still people. And in an environment of money and team and mine, and it can feel very challenging. So in business, I have learned, especially over the last year with the Women Network, it's a little bit of a shift to think of the perspective of collaboration versus competition. And that can be in friendship, that can be with your spouse or your partner, that can be with your, so are we in constant competition or are we collaborating? And why are we all so much in competition? Why is it my way or your way?
I feel like as women, it's almost sewn into us in the society. And I 100% agree with you. Collaboration's the new black. There's so much of the pie to go around. So once you hit that piece and you came out of that room and you were in a good space, what were the next steps for you to move forward in your business?
I was able to just get out and go talk to people. I went back into physical action. So still in eyes closed action, right? So there's eyes closed action and then physical action. So where I'm still visualizing. So all of that still has to take place. And then out actually physically meeting people, because that's great. I can sit in my little room, but if I'm not touching people in some way, whether it's through Zoom, through social media, through getting out and going to the store, whatever that is, you still have to touch people. Nobody gets there alone. Nobody gets there alone. And so if now I'm locked in the room, now I've raised my vibe, I'm not ever going to get there alone. There always has to be, in every situation, there always is someone else or multiple someone else's lifting you up. So that's, I think, one of our biggest challenges is remembering that we don't have to do this by ourselves. And asking for help and support is a brave thing. It's not a weak thing.
And that's hard for a lot of women.
For sure.
Agreed.
Because we were taught to carry it all.
Mm-hmm.
Carry the kids, carry the household, carry the stress of paying the bills. We carry all of it. Carry all of it. And why not just ask for help?
It's just really inspiring. Your story is so inspiring because you came from a place where you were just almost going to give up, self-doubt, to just feeding yourself. You watch all these videos and people say, oh, feed yourself with positivity. And you actually took the step to, like you said, as a good student, and just did the work. And were able to come out of it with a whole new perspective. I'm curious because I would assume that people responded to you differently after you had transformation within, that not only did you see things differently, but did people react to you differently because you had a different sort of being in the world?
Sure. So I had multiple sides of that. So people who said, that's not really who you are because you're this negative person. Like they didn't want to let go of that person. So there was those people who were the crabs in the bucket before they back down.
Yeah. Bless and release.
Yeah. But for sure, it was the people who would show up were different. And it wasn't just through me. People who showed up through other people were different. And lifting my vibration lifted the team and lifted everybody. So we were all doing these steps together, learning how to not let the fear drive the bus. And stepping into that uncomfortable zone and that unknown zone and just taking a breath and doing it and finding such amazing opportunity on the other side. And there were people who didn't want to come along, and that's okay.
That goes back to that vibration, right? Matching vibration. Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Totally okay.
Yeah.
So vibe high.
Vibe high.
Love it. Vibe high. Hashtag vibe high.
That'll be
and
a
remember,
hashtag.
it's a choice. It's always a choice. Everything is a choice. Every single thing is a choice. Left or right, up or down, sleep or awake, coffee or tea. Everything is a choice. And so stop and go, what choices am I making that are bringing down my vibration? Choices am I making to let fear and doubt and scarcity and lack drive my bus? Those are all choices. So let's make a better choice.
That's what my mentor always tells me when I complain about something. He says, "It's your choice. You chose it." And I'm like, he's right.
Yeah.
And it's good to have that constant reminder. I should actually put that on my sticky note on my computer. Say, there's a choice. You have a choice to do things, to be things, to go places, to anything. Yeah.
Well, calling my mentor, and I'll leave you with this though. I called up and said, I cannot believe blah, blah, blah. How did this happen? What did I do to bring this on? This is crazy. And he said to me, why did you write that into your blueprint? Oh, personal responsibility. Oh, it's me. Oh, it's my thought process. Oh, so it's not something external that's happening to me. It's me happening to me. So shift me, that gets fixed. So don't write that stuff into your blueprint.
Yeah, I think we forget the personal responsibility we have in everything, good or bad. We want to give credit to other things when it's good, because that's just maybe where we sit. And then when it's bad, we have no problem taking on that negativity as our ownership. So I love that you have that point. Like, you didn't want to give yourself ownership of all the amazing things, but then he was like, don't do that. Don't write that in there. You did this. I think that's amazing. That's a great point.
Did it either way, good or bad. It's all me. Why not choose good? I have the paintbrush. I can paint it however I choose. So paint something amazing. Why would you paint yucky stuff? Paint the most beautiful painting for yourself. And that's what your journal and your vision will help you do.
Paint a beautiful picture. I love that. Thank you so much, JoJo. That was really inspiring. And I'm so glad we got to talk about it in more detail than I'd heard it before. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy with everything that you do. And if our listeners or our viewers resonated with this, everything will be in the show notes where you can reach JoJo, and make sure you hit that subscribe button and see some more great information down the road. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
both.
you.